Welcome into another episode of the Autzen Audibles podcast. Erik Skopil, John Evans here. I'm live in Cedar Rapids, 30-minute drive about from Iowa City. John back in Eugene. I was at Kinnick Stadium about 40 minutes ago, wrapping up coverage from Oregon's 18-16 victory over the Iowa Hawkeyes, a game that was a little more stressful than I think anybody maybe was hoping for, but not totally surprising. We talked about it on a review show on Thursday that this game may come down to the wire. The Hawkeyes play a certain brand of football, and this did live up to that brand. I don't think there's any question. This felt like a Big Ten football game. That was what one of the first things Dan Lanning said when he sat down was like, got to win the games in the conference a certain way against certain teams, and they had to do it tonight. A lot to get to here. I think a lot of things that will make fans excited, some things that are concerning. We'll do a little bit of our normal hit the Twitter/X machine and see some fan reactions, the glass half full, glass half empty. But initial reaction here, I think, John, we have to start with Oregon has a place kicker who made some clutch field goals in the month of November. And I don't know about you, but I didn't necessarily have a ton of confidence he would make all three of those kicks. And for Atticus Sappington to go 3 for 3 tonight, make probably the biggest kick of his career, certainly in the conversation for that, in a moment like that with wind and precipitation swirling around him, I thought that was kind of answering the call in a game where you needed everything to go right.
Yeah, Sappington to hit that first one, the 48-yarder. You feel like the weather, just nothing is seemingly going right for this situation, for him to be able to hit a field goal like this, especially when I was looking back at it. He hasn't kicked a field goal, like an actual field goal, not an extra point, since the Indiana game. And even that game, the game before that, I think, or Penn State, he missed one in each of those. On his boxer, he had a miss in each of those games. So to come out in this one, 3 for 3, money, just, and all of them from distance too, from around 40 plus yards. The last one I think was 39. And to be able to do that in the weather, clutch gene. Oregon has had a history of faults on special teams and from the kicking position specifically, that have held them back in some big games at times, but that was not the issue today. And a huge game from Atticus Sappington after even Gage Hirsch was doing a lot of the kicking in the Rutgers game and the Wisconsin game the past couple of weeks.
The 46-yarder was the longest make he's had in his Oregon career. He did hit a 48-yarder at Oregon State back in 2023. You know, his nickname is Automaticus. It hasn't really felt that way all the time, especially this year, kind of, as you mentioned, some ups and downs. Like you go back, John kind of touched on some of it there, but you go back kind of his game log. It's 3 for 3 tonight, but the last time he made all of his field goal attempts was the Oregon State game back on September 20th. Like you said, didn't try any field goals against Wisconsin or Rutgers, missed one in each of the Indiana and Penn State games. This kind of gets him back on the right track here, some positive momentum. And I did ask about that after the game of like, how much did it help your confidence, or did it build some kind of momentum or rhythm going into the game-winning attempt to have made a couple from really similar distances before? Because like you mentioned there, Atticus had kicks of 46, 40, and 39. So the third one was the shortest, but they're all kind of in that same range. And it was the range. Like if you go back and look at what he's been missing this year, you know, he'd missed one in the 40 to 49, and he'd missed one in the 30 to 39 against Indiana. And I believe that was a 39 or a 38-yard attempt. So, excuse me, you know, some of the pitfalls in past games were from this same kind of range. And yet here he was in the big spot. Big credit to Luke Basso for delivering the snap, James Ferguson Reynolds for the hold on all three of those in tough conditions. You have to credit the whole operation there, because these are the moments where you just don't know where it's going to go. And frankly, we saw long snapping issues. Like Oregon maybe is in a different spot here if Iowa doesn't snap it over its own punter's head for a safety on its second drive, nearly snaps its first one over the punter's head as well. Oregon was dialed in here on special teams, made some really big plays. And Atticus Sappington, again, at a program that you go back and you think about Camden Lewis missing a field goal in Seattle. You think about Alejandro Maldonado missing multiple big kicks and multiple big games down the stretch of seasons. You can leave in the comments if I'm forgetting some. I was chatting with Tyson Alger of the Athletic, now of the Lookout, about kind of Oregon's history of November missed field goal kicks. I think there are some we were forgetting, but those were the three kind of big ones we remembered. To actually have a kicker come through in a game like this, a must-win game for the college football playoff race, to kind of, they're one of three teams with one loss in the conference race. Indiana was very close to joining them as a fourth team and opening this race up a little bit. Still don't think the odds are high at all that they'll be in the Big Ten championship game the first week there in December in Indianapolis, but you needed this one and they got it done.
Yeah, and I think what you said with the building that confidence from those other field goals, even just seeing Stevens out there hit a 58-yarder for Iowa, just to see that, yeah, the weather is not affecting kicks today. I think that just builds that confidence too, because you get into that around 40-yard range, and that's where you really start to feel sketchy with Sappington out there, where you're like, uh-oh, they're getting towards about the 20-yard line or so. It's going to be a longer field goal. He's far from a guarantee at that point. And 3 for 3 on all those tonight, just absolutely money. And in a game where Oregon gets one touchdown, we knew that this was going to be low scoring and that special teams were going to be a factor. I put one field goal on my score prediction because we hadn't seen a field goal from this team in a couple of weeks. So to get 3 out of Sappington tonight, huge when the team needed it.
I heard an Iowa reporter turn to another Iowa reporter behind me right before the kick went up and said, if he makes this, no one's going to forget this kid's name. And I think it's a little bit of a case on the Oregon side of when you talk about this season and who knows how this is all going to play out, this will be one of those kind of lasting memories. So big for Atticus to come out, hit all three, hit the big one at the end. But he doesn't get a chance to do that if not for Dante Moore leading the offense down the field. I think the weather was a little bit cooled off there, and so they were able to open up the pass game. But he's without so many of his primary weapons in this game. We can dive into as much as we feel comfortable with, and Dan did give some updates on a couple of these guys who are banged up and unable to play. But he's out there throwing the ball to Malik Benson, Cooper Perry, Jeremiah McClellan. At the beginning of the year, these were not the names. I mean, I guess Benson was pretty involved early, but these were not the primary pass catchers going into the season. And especially that Malik Benson catch down the sideline there. That's a big catch from Malik, a great throw from Dante. And frankly, without that connection, you don't get that field goal from Atticus. So in a game where I believe Dante had like 65 pass yards going into the 2-minute drill, he finishes with 112. You kind of wanted to see, a buddy of mine texted me right before he went out there and said, if Dante's the guy we think he is, he'll get this figured out. And he did. And I think there's a ton of credit that needs to be given to a bunch of different players on offense when they're playing so shorthanded. But Dante in particular, there were some concerns about how he would handle some of these kind of moments or the weather or an Iowa defense that's really difficult to move the ball against. And even though it wasn't perfect throughout, had the interception early, had a couple other situations where you just kind of wish, gosh, went a little differently. When it mattered the most, just like Atticus, Oregon's quarterback made it happen.
Yeah, first off, to the point that the Iowa reporter made, I don't think anyone's forgetting Atticus Sappington's name. I think it's about as good as you can get in terms of like a kicker name. Pretty just the way it rolls off the tongue is a very memorable one. But Dante Moore, that last drive, the throw to Benson, ridiculous throw to fit it in that window, throwing from the far hash. And in college football, the hashes are wider. Yeah, that's a farther throw than it is in the NFL. It's a throw you don't have to make in the NFL because the hashes are closer together. Throw that from the far hash, hit it in the sideline in a window that is ridiculously small to Benson. And that was the play that really changed things because they had gotten it to around field goal or the midfield, but that was the one that really put them into field goal range, gave them a chance to go win it. But early in that one, you could see, especially right after he hits they come out there, they're trying to throw RPOs against a light box and things aren't working early. And then he hits the one to Bryant that he gets hurt on. And it feels like things are starting to go right. And then immediately he gets aggressive, throws one it tries to fit one into Cooper Perry in a situation where you shouldn't be making that throw. And that was something that we all of us remember Dan at the beginning of the season talking about that Montana State game, Dante Moore rolling out on a 3rd and goal from about the 10-yard line, runs out of bounds at the 5 instead of forcing anything and lets the team take 3 points. That's this time takes those 3 points off the board potentially there by throwing that interception, but to be able to reset in the second half, once the run game got going, and the run game really got going, then on that final drive, just being able to be calm, not affected by the pressure that Iowa was sending after him on throughout that entire drive, because they were sending blitzes, they were sending free rushers, and he was just getting it out quickly. No sacks in this game. And also when you have Alex Harkey down in that one, Janoris Wilson, a really good game. Just everything you asked for on that last drive. That's the moment. When Fernando Mendoza has a big drive today, Dante Moore also a big drive to go win it, and making big plays throughout it, especially that throw to Benson.
Let's just momentarily touch this. I think we'll talk more maybe on our podcast next week. But the Ducks had a very, very rough week of practice, it sounds like. I was getting texts pretty late out here in Iowa from sources and then buddies asking me what was going on, because the rumor mill was about as lively as I've ever seen it on a Friday night before a big game. And ultimately, DeCorian Moore, unavailable in this game. Kenyon Sadiq, unavailable in this game. Alex Harkey, unavailable in this game. Devin Jackson, unavailable in this game. All guys who'd played against Wisconsin, who didn't seem to suffer new injuries against Wisconsin. Dan did note that Sadiq is still kind of dealing with the lingering effects of that landing against Rutgers. But this was kind of a scary, one of the worst possible outcomes was, it's going to be a game where points are at a premium. And on offense in particular, you're removing your two leading receivers. You're taking away your right tackle, who of your tackles is your better run blocker in a game is going to come down to how you run. And I agree with you, John. I'll need to go back and watch the film. I'm curious to see the PFF grades, but this is one of the most impressive rushing performances I've seen from Oregon, certainly since they joined this conference. People who maybe don't understand the context, I saw a couple of people saying, the Oregon offense still isn't clicking. 261 yards on the ground is the most Iowa has allowed since 2022. The 7.2 yards per carry are the second most period in the Phil Parker defensive coordinating era at Iowa. And again, this is kind of pound for pound one of the best coordinators in the entire country. To do that without your right tackle, who again has been kind of a linchpin key piece of this run game, a huge tip of the cap there. And then I know the pass game was far from as productive as you'd like it to be, but how about Jamari Johnson showing up here? He has his best game probably as a Duck, 4 catches, 36 yards. Mentioned Malik Benson, Jeremiah McClellan coming through there without DeCorian on the field. You wrote about it a little bit, John. I know you have some thoughts. I should also mention Jerry Mixon on defense has his best game as a Duck, 13 tackles to lead the team. Was, I thought, pretty dang impressive in run fits, and the Oregon defense as a whole did a good job there. But these are 4 starters, pseudo starters, who were kind of unexpected end of the week scratches. And yet all the guys that filled in, I won't say it was seamless or perfect, or you feel awesome about where everything is at, because certainly you wonder about DeCorian and when he'll be back. Dan kind of indicated the others are maybe a little closer. It sounds like an ankle sprain for Harkey. Sadiq still dealing with that hip. Jackson, he said it was really close, but non-contact injury for DeCorian. He doesn't think it'll be season ending. That's good news. But just focusing on this particular performance, the Ducks were going to need to rely on basically 20-ish% of their starters being unavailable on this roster, and they got it done.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to about 8 hours ago, and I was sitting here thinking this couldn't really be going any worse for Oregon right now. Before this was starting, as we were waiting for the availability report to come out, I was texting you. You were watching the guys out there, seeing who was warming up, and we were just all of a sudden you realize Oregon's going to be down multiple starters. They're going to be playing one of the best defenses in the country in a tough weather environment, in one of the a Kinnick, a stadium where the fans are basically on the field there, and can be a very tough environment to play in.
I was just going to say, for people who weren't there, they are right on top of you in a way that is unique. Like when I was walking across the field to do interviews, like they're probably 4 to 5 feet off the ground. So it does feel like even walking across after the game, that noise is just on top of you.
Yeah. So for Oregon you think about this game, it was seemingly everything was going as bad as it could have possibly gone going into this one. The line was shifting in Iowa's favor right before kickoff as we were realizing all these injuries. And yeah, like you said, for everybody to step up into those roles, and be able to adjust the game plan where you needed to, working some of that 21 personnel with Dier Hill and Jordan Davison, when you know you can't run your 12 with Sadiq and Jamari Johnson out there all the time, and then like the guys like Johnson who did step up. He's been really good all season as this team's tight end too. I hopped on PFF during the middle of that game, sorted the power 4 tight ends by yards after the catch per reception. Jamari Johnson over 11, because a lot of them are near the line of scrimmage, but he's good with the ball in his hands. It was third best among over 100 tight ends that I pulled up on that leaderboard. It's something that Oregon has done well with their tight ends, getting them yards after the catch, but he really showed it today. 24 of those 36 yards for him come after the catch, and in a game where you need that, because the passing game downfield isn't working, except you do hit him on a big corner route to help set things up earlier in that game. But yeah, really good stuff. And I think he's a guy that next season, when Kenyon Sadiq is likely playing for whichever team takes him in the first round of the NFL draft, Jamar Johnson is gonna have a season that could resemble what Kenyon Sadiq is doing this year for this team, especially the way Sadiq came on early. And I think kind of took people by storm after being that tight end 2 last year. I think Jamar Johnson could have a similar kind of breakout next year.
One other injury / replacement note I didn't hit is it really was 5 starters unavailable for most of this game. You mentioned earlier, Gary Bright Jr. goes down with an injury that literally Cade Catton has to like pick him up and carry him like a big brother carrying a little brother off the playground or something. He ended up going to the locker room, didn't come back to the game. Dan didn't have much of an update in post game. I'm sure we'll have some updates. Well, I'm not sure if I should say I'm sure, but we'll know by Friday for sure if he's playing or not. And I would imagine we'll have a better sense after talking to Dan this week. Cooper Perry is the player I wanted to mention there. True freshman, is now one of 4 available scholarship receivers, one of 5 total receivers available by the end of this game that made the trip. Along with, we mentioned some of the names earlier, but Malik Benson, Jeremiah McCullen, Justice Lope ends up playing quite a bit here. And then Darian Anderson, a walk-on, was the other to make the trip along with Perry. Not that Perry had a super productive day, but 1 catch for 4 yards. That also came on that final drive. I'm pretty sure on the little slant route there, I think on second down. All these guys stepped up. They needed it. They needed contributions. This was a very, very deep receiver room, deep enough that like Jurian Dickey bounced like before the season really got underway because he just didn't think he had a role. Today's a day where like if he was around, like he might have gotten a pretty heavy target share. I'm not blaming him necessarily because when he left, he was probably like wide receiver 7 or 8. On a day like today, he might have been receiver 3 or 4. But this is the situations they're at, and it'll be fascinating to see over the next couple of weeks who's available for games, like who's available on a short week against Minnesota next Friday, who's available against USC and against Washington, who's available for the postseason. There's like some real question marks at receiver when you've got more players hurt than available. So that's certainly something to monitor going forward. But let's hit one more thing on offense, then we need to go to defense here for some positives, a couple of gripes to have. I thought overall the defense played really well, but one last thing on I think we haven't touched enough on. I don't even think we said his name. Noah Whittington has probably his most impactful day in an Oregon uniform. Time after time after time, chunk yardage, setting them up and getting drives going on first and second down with big runs. Finishes with 118 yards. One of I think 6 running backs the last 3 years to get 100 against this Iowa defense. Again, a really stout Iowa defense. Thought he was fantastic, and like at times it ran counter to what we had anticipated, where it was like Oregon just ran it right up the middle against an Iowa defense that's kind of one of their strengths, and with a lot of success with both Whittington and then also the 2 true freshmen, Jordan Davison, and Dier Hill Jr. Like contributions from all 3 of those guys really was kind of the big 3. And Dier gets in the end zone for the only offense or the only touchdown of the day for Oregon on a really nice piece of running where he kind of, he's got that reputation as the Lightning and Davison as the Thunder. Well, he kind of ran through some arm tackles, forced his way into the end zone and gave Oregon a 9-0 lead. And at that point, John, it was kind of felt like they were fulfilling what we had talked about. It's like if Oregon can build a 2-score lead early on in this game, maybe that's where they get some separation. Obviously that doesn't happen, but they played with the lead pretty much the entire day with the exception of when Gronowski got in there to put Iowa ahead 16-15 there late in the fourth quarter. Thought the run game just in general, I know you're going to write about it a little bit tomorrow after doing a more thorough rewatch of the game and kind of charting everything. But on
Mhm.
first glance, having watched it, I thought this was one of the more impressive rushing days I've seen from an Oregon team, especially when you consider the competition.
Yeah, and for them to rely on Whittington as heavily as they did in this game, giving him 17 touches, the most he's had all season, it was a game where they really did. You could tell early that, I mean, well, this is what we talked about. We knew it was going to be a game where they had to rely on the run, weren't going to be able to pass the ball, and for Whittington to be that guy, I think was really exciting to see and continue to see him. He had the game against Rutgers where a couple weeks ago where he's started to break some of those long runs again that we saw early in the season before he got hurt. But to see them just rely on him as that bell cow type back, and then being able to mix the freshman in there with the, like we said all year, that Thunder and Lightning duo that those two have. But then DR Hill at the same time showing off a little bit of that power. He's got some of that Alvin Kamara-y type contact balance things where he can kind of just bounce away from people. And he's very like, it was like, because it was helping because it was wet today out there, obviously with the rain, but he just slips away from tackles. Like he can, guys get arm tackles around him and he just slips through them and can maintain that top speed. And you saw it on that touchdown run. And then Davison as well, another really good game for him. Back-to-back 100-yard games coming into this one. I thought they were going to lean on him more heavily than Whittington in this one, but either way, those two guys combined for 15 touches, almost 100 yards for the two freshmen. That's a three-headed monster at running back. You got guys who do different things, and all of them are dynamic and are threats at any time they're on the field.
I'm going to pull this back up on the screen here from our preview show. We were both really critical, or skeptical, I should say. And for those listening, this was CQuack's prop that we put up, which was Oregon will rush for more yards than passing, and Iowa will pass for more yards rushing. And we didn't think that second part would happen. And yet, look up at the stats here. And this is kind of how I wanted to transition to defense. Like, Oregon did a pretty darn good job here against the ground game. I know it didn't quite end up there because it ended up being 140 yards rushing to 138 yards passing, but 3.3 yards per carry for Iowa is really good work against an Iowa offense that is where their bread is absolutely buttered. And conversely, kind of when the game's on the line here, a few mistakes in coverage or just maybe really good protection allows the offensive players to find soft spots in zones or beat their guys. But Gronowski, who starts the game really cold, not a shocker, ends up 10 of 18, 138 yards and a touchdown. Statistically, a better day than Dante Moore. And a lot of this comes in the fourth quarter here. Let me see if I can quickly pull this up here. In the fourth quarter, he has 71 of those 138 yards with all of those coming on that final drive, actually. So he had more than half of his yards on that final drive passing, and then obviously ran it in. What did you think of some of those issues? And you might have actually seen more replays than I did. Were these Oregon mistakes? Were these Iowa's benefited from making good plays? Like, what did you see there? Is this because Oregon secondary, we didn't think they'd have much of an issue against a pass offense in Iowa that has not been very productive at all. Oregon has routinely held its opposing passing attacks and quarterbacks well below their season average, and Iowa actually finishes, I think, 12 or 13 yards ahead of what they'd been averaging on the day. Kind of what did you see there? And I don't want to be too critical of the Oregon defense because I thought in general they played pretty well, but this was maybe an area I was a little surprised Iowa had as much success as they did.
No, it's a mix of Iowa at certain times. They like the 38-yarder that helped set up their early touchdown. That was a really good play call, getting like a little drag into a wheel route. It's one of my favorite ones on Madden. I get my quarterback rolled out through the wheel route back to the tight end the other way. You get that a receiver isolated on Bryce Betcher one-on-one running down the sideline. It's not Bryce Betcher's a good athlete at linebacker, but he doesn't have receiver speed. And then the other one that on that other drive, I don't know how you let a tight end just run free down the middle. It looked like they were playing cover 2, and neither of the two safeties picked him up. And I don't know who was supposed to be running the rail down the middle, but no one was at the time. Or honestly, I think they were in man because what the corners were doing on that play. It was like a cover 2 man look, and just no one picked him up down the middle. So credit to Gronowski for hitting some of those throws, and in Iowa for scheming those up at times, and especially on that last drive, he did find that rhythm and was able to, even not just the ones like that where he's able to hit chunks, but picking up some, hitting for 5 yards to convert some third downs.
A fourth
those
down as well?
exactly, those underneath ones, just being that help them move the chains throughout that drive to supplement the run game. And then what you were saying with Oregon, what they were doing defensively against the run, yeah, to do this to Iowa. Iowa has been running on teams all year. They've been running on teams for multiple years with their outside zone, and Oregon had a really good game. I thought Tatum Tuioti going down at one point was very concerning because we know how impactful he is against the run, and then he was able to make some big time plays later in the game, helping stop the first and second and goal before ultimately, for some reason, I'll have to look things back because I don't know how he ended up as the QB spy on that third down, but it seems like that should not be the guy you have as your QB spy. If I was to guess, I think they cut before, but I think Iowa probably was all bunched up together and then spread everything out to before running that to kind of get Oregon in a bad situation. But to first half of this game, I was averaging less than 3 yards per carry. That gets up towards 4 in the second half. But I think that's where it really, you made that difference, was that what we were saying about getting up 2 scores early for Oregon. If you can get up 2 scores early and force Iowa to pass, that's what they were doing by shutting down that run and shutting down what Iowa wanted to do early in this game. And then you got into some of those passing situations Iowa did execute and got themselves back into it. But the run defense overall, huge game for them. There was a ton of 5-man fronts, even getting guys like Jericho Johnson in there at times to play nose tackle. They knew they were going to need everybody on the defensive line, and I think everybody came to play today. There's a lot of rotation throughout there. It was Terrence Green getting in there, Tion Gray getting in there, Ashton Porter. Everybody had to make an impact to be able to beat this Iowa team up front because their offensive line was good. They early in the game, Mateo was getting mauled at certain times by their left tackle, and I was like, this could end up being a long day.
A couple sequences I wanted to highlight on defense here. Dante Moore throws the interception. Defense comes out, forces a punt. And then in the second half here, right after Oregon has a 3-and-out, I thought this was arguably one of the bigger sequences of the entire game. Iowa moves it right down the field. It's like a 7-minute drive, 6:46, 11 plays. They get the ball at about the 15-yard line, and Brandon Finney Jr. comes through, forces a fumble on Caden Wetchen on a little, I think it was a little screen action. Maybe it was a run. I can't remember. Something out of the backfield. Bear Alexander ends up on it. It's a turnover, duck ball. That felt like a moment there where if Iowa comes in and scores the touchdown to take the lead, or I think they could have kicked a field goal and they would have been down, 4 at the time, something like that. Down 1 if they hit down 5 if they hit a field goal. That was a really crucial sequence there. If they don't make that stop and Iowa scores some points, we know this is a 2-point win. That might shift things. Like Oregon might have been in a place where they needed a touchdown at the end rather than Atticus Sappington being the hero. And I don't know if they get that done necessarily from that down distance where they were on the field. Obviously, some of the strategy is probably a little different, and it's not, apples to apples, but that's a huge sequence. And then the other one that maybe gets overlooked just a teensy-weensy bit is that 2-point conversion was awfully close. And I'm not saying Oregon defensively necessarily did much of anything other than just be in the vicinity, and the receiver ends up barely getting his foot on the white line instead of the back of the end zone. But again, if that's a 2-point conversion, this game is going to overtime, and we'll see, who knows what happens there. So there were a lot of these sequences on defense where just by small margins, they're able to get off the field or stop Iowa from adding to its scoring total. And you needed all of those in this game. And Dan said it afterwards. This was going to be a big special teams game. Obviously, we touched on some of that with Sappington. Also, James Ferguson Reynolds, another great day of just keeping the ball away from Wetjen. We talked about that going in. Wetjen did get some. No, actually, no, he didn't have any return yards. My fault. I thought he had a punt return. He did not. Great work there, keeping him out of the stat sheet and uninvolved in that perspective. And then the defense was what Dan said. They had to play a big defensive game. I thought there were moments where it was really, really nice. There were some sequences that were disappointing. Obviously, that last drive in the fourth quarter, Iowa's final sequence. Wish you could have found a way to get off the field. I think there were 2 third-down conversions and 2 fourth-down conversions. One thing here that's kind of related to this, but a little bit off the train of thought, I just thought if we should mention, I don't know how that's not intentional grounding on the 3rd and goal from the 3-yard line.
That was just a weird play in general. I think the refs were just as confused as Gronowski was.
Yeah, because Dan was asked about it after the game and said he was told by an official that there was a receiver in the area there wasn't a single receiver past the line of scrimmage, I don't think, or at least not in the end zone. So that should have
everybody
been
on Iowa except Gronowski seemed to think that was a run play all the way.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I felt. So it felt like there was a miscommunication. He just threw the ball away in the back of the end zone, and there's no one anywhere near the ball there. There's nowhere near it. And so officiating in this game felt like it was kind of perplexing in terms of Iowa has one penalty all game, and it's on the illegal touching on the safety. Weren't penalized the entire rest of the game. Not that Oregon's total was overly significant. I think they finished with, was it 4 or 5?
5 for 57.
5 for 57. Not a massive total, but it was some pretty big ones. One of the field goals for Iowa comes off a pass interference that was kind of iffy, and it was by iffy, but it was kind of, I don't know if I totally got it. I didn't think Jeremiah McClellan made much of any contact on his comeback route there. Saliapaga's hold was, I need to go watch that one again, but there was some kind of chatter in the press box amongst the Oregon media that one was a little bit questionable. So I don't want to relitigate the officiating entirely, but if Oregon doesn't win this game, I guarantee you DuckTerritory's duck pond would be blowing up about some of the officiating stuff here.
Yeah, sometimes you just need things like football. You're playing a game with an oblong ball. It's gonna bounce weird, and sometimes you just need it to bounce the right way. And I think that kind of happened for Oregon tonight at times. The safety early in that one, Finney delivering a good hit, but his helmet happening to hit right on the football to knock it out to give you a fumble that you need. Yeah, the officiating was a little bit all over the place, I thought, throughout the game. But Oregon had enough things bounce their way, so to be able to come away with it in the end.
Should we jump over to the glass half full, glass half empty? Are there any other things I'm forgetting from this game? There's so much going on here, John, and you're watching from home, so you might be able to locate an item or two that we've overlooked. Is there anything like that you can think of?
Not really. I just think this is a really impressive win. I think this is going to be looked at. I think it should be viewed as that. I think it needs to be respected as a win because this Iowa team is really good. They're really good on defense, and to go into that with as many guys as you were down and come away with that win, I think you look at Oregon's schedule at this point, easily their best win of the season, and I think it's going to hold that way.
I'm happy you brought that up because that actually brought up a conversation we have in the press box with James Crepia, the Oregonian, who was saying he thought maybe this is the biggest win of the Dan Lanning era. I would probably suggest last year's Ohio State win held a little bit more water, but this is of this season. You're right, absolutely the signature win. I know that Penn State game, again, if Penn State ends up winning over Indiana today, maybe we're having a little bit teensy-weensy different conversation. But certainly a signature win and a win we'll be talking about in the context of the season for quite some time. Yeah, I'm happy you brought that up because with everything that was kind of working against them, there was a lot of negativity, both on social media and the Oregon circles, and then certainly on our website once kind of the rumor mill started running rampant on Friday night. And then you see the availability report, and I'm going through the pregame going like all the guys that are listed as questionable aren't going to play, and it's a bunch of key players. Gary Bryant goes down earlier. At one point, Tatum Tuioti, it looked like, I'm like, hopefully he didn't get seriously injured. I think it was just like a dead arm, but it did feel like there was kind of negative momentum building. So really impressed that they got this win. And again, it keeps them very much alive in the college football playoff. And with what we just saw out of Washington losing to Wisconsin today, that certainly makes that game look a little bit more manageable. USC took care of business against Northwestern, but it wasn't always perfect. It was really close in that first half. Some kind of close calls there. I know with the pick six that didn't end up being a pick six for the Wildcats. So certainly going to be interesting how the end of the season plays out, but Oregon very much in position now to finish this thing if they are able to get some of these guys back and carry some of this momentum into the stretch run. All right, let's do some glass half fulls here. Oops, I actually had the glass half empties pulled up. The glass half fulls. Okay. These are kind of rapid fire. The overall team camaraderie, players and coaches remain connected and bought in. The running backs, absolutely. I think this game, you don't win without what they achieved on the ground. I don't think there's any question.
No, absolutely.
that.
I think you have really, especially these last couple of weeks, that three-headed monster at running back, Whittington, Davison, Hill, that you've really found something as good as Jaden Lamar has been at some things, especially the blocking he was doing early in the year and some of the explosive runs he did. You got three guys that you feel like you can really trust down the stretch, I think.
Ducks won the turnover battle, including the safety and in the trenches. You do those things and you're usually going to win games because those things travel. It's another good one. Brutal conditions yet again, and they found a way. This time missing some key players. Running back depth is special. Yeah, what John was saying, a three-headed monster that is as good as we've seen this program have in a moment in terms of just the depth of three really big-time running backs. Defense has the ability to be special, need to clean up a couple things, but all in all, you got to love the effort. And Atticus seems like he's corrected things in a big way for the stretch run. Outside of Sappington, someone says, we have such a deep running back room, and they're all tanks. Yeah, I love that. Janoris held up decently after the first quarter, and all three backs made their impact. A lot of run backs, as you would expect.
I'm excited about Janoris Wilson, though, for sure. I think just getting an opportunity to see him in a starting role, I think he's a guy that has a lot of potential at tackle. He's a very good athlete, and I thought was a guy who could potentially be competing with Harkey for that right tackle spot to go into the year. We've seen what he does as the sixth lineman on this team, so he's a guy who will probably be starting at right tackle next year. So good to just have an opportunity for him there.
On that same vein, O-line dominance. Yep, totally agree. Oregon, we probably haven't hit this as much as we should. Oregon dominated in the trenches in this game. That was not something we entirely expected. A little bit less so probably when Iowa had the ball, but again, holding that offense to 3.3 yards per carry, had 2 sacks, I believe. Tatum had 1, Bryce had 1.
Mm-hmm.
Am I missing one? I mean, they were able to get home a little bit more than we expected and cause some issues. I think that the trench warfare really favored Oregon. That was not something that I think was necessarily the consensus coming in. I'm hoping this convinces Stein and he puts away the cute plays that was in reference to the running game. That was something we should also just acknowledge is like Stein takes a lot of flack from the fan base. I get some of it. I don't get other parts. But how about on a day like this where the weather's not good? This is back-to-back games where they've just said, we're just going to run the ball and run the ball and run the ball. Dante had 21 pass attempts, and I believe that was 14 before that final drive, and they had 36 rush attempts in this game. And I believe that was 34 before that final drive. So it was a 34-14 rush to pass split before the 2-minute drill, which is always going to lean a little bit more pass heavy just because of the circumstances of the game. So, yeah, I agree with that one. I think that's worth bringing up is just that good on Will Stein for kind of leaning into what's working.
I think the beginning of the game had people a little peeved, and I think Lanning even acknowledged that afterwards, saying that they were trying to throw an RPO because of the read against the box. They weren't not trying to run the football, but sometimes people need to understand that what they're trying to do there. At the same time, though, I think Stein sometimes, first play of the game, maybe you could just hand the ball off and instead of trying to throw these screen passes, because especially when that was the thing that was killing me, and I think in that Wisconsin game where I noticed times on film where you're throwing a second down screen pass that's incomplete because it's raining, and then all of a sudden it's 3rd and long, and you're doing that multiple times. So just finding those consistent things on the ground, because you're not going to have incompletions if you just hand the ball off.
Oh, you cut out a little bit there for me at the end, so I'm sorry if there was awkward airtime, but you were paused. One thing I should note is that I'd forgotten about this a little bit. Oregon opens with 3 pass incompletions for this game. Mm-hmm. That meant in the middle up until that 2-minute drill, they would have run 34 rush attempts to 11 passes from basically, the second drive of the game to the final drive of the game. That was a huge, huge dose of run.
And if you had asked us what we thought the game plan should be, that's exactly what I thought it should have been. Running the football and utilizing guys like Davison and Whittington and Hill. You got weapons out there, so go use them.
Okay, moving over to the glass half empties. And you know what? There's some gripes. I get some of them, but a lot of this is actually pretty positive. I mean, this one, glass half empty, allowed way too many explosive pass plays to Iowa of all teams. Yeah, I get it. That was perplexing. And they came in big moments, like third downs, touchdowns.
I feel like it's been a thing for this team all season. They give up one 40-yard coverage bust every game or something like that.
Safeties were less than dominant in the pass game. Some easily defendable pass routes got us when the safeties were too eager to step up against the run. I kind of get that in the context of this game. Mateo played better, but continues to crash to hit the tackles early in games rather than collapsing to the hip. Yeah, didn't get the Mateo game we were hoping for. We talked about that needing to be, or not needing, but expecting or hoping that might be kind of a point of progress. He did have half a tackle for loss on a run play.
And an opportunity for a sack, too, that he did kind of get held on, but also was grabbing for Gronowski's horse collar. But was in the backfield on that one.
Some defensive play calling. How on earth we had a 3-4 in the box on 4th and goal, and it was so obvious to QB draw. That's a good one here. That was Chris Penfield on X who pointed that out, because I turned to Chris Hansen of the Register Guard and said, this is going to be a draw play with just the numbers in the box on that on the touchdown to go ahead for Iowa. I thought that was pretty egregious, just to, like, I don't know. I shouldn't be able to call out the play call of all people in the stadium. And I kind of had a sense that might be what was coming based upon what the formations and just where the numbers were in the box. Penalties again. Also, defense keeps getting beat week after week. But defense has been pretty darn good. But I get it in the coming out of this one. I understand that, just because there were some moments where the defense had a chance to put this game away. Like that, I think it was a 3rd and 8 on that 40-yard pass on their final drive that led to the Gronowski go-ahead touchdown. And you're just kind of going like, you can just get off the field here. Iowa may never get the ball back, and you don't need all of these end-of-game heroics from Sappington.
Yeah, 3rd and 5.
3rd and 5, okay.
3rd and 5. But either way, you're 3rd and 5, you have Iowa backed up to their own 12, and they hit you for 40 yards. That seemed like that completely swung things there. Health.
Understand it's unpredictable, but in a bye week, losing so many players creates a slew of negative narratives. Yeah, again, there's bad luck, and that's what injuries are almost exclusively. You're not trying to hurt your own players in practice, but to come out of a week where it's a bye week, and Dan even kind of acknowledged like they didn't have a ton of full contact periods to have so many key players be absent from, sort of confusing.
I think this is like the worst possible time you could have hit this injury bug in the schedule too, because it's right after the second bye and right before you head into a short week with this Friday game against Minnesota.
Linebackers in coverage were atrocious. Eyes in the backfield led to Iowa's only offensive success. I will say Iowa did a good job of like a couple of times getting Tatum Tuioti in coverage, and that's not even necessarily like, I'm not going to be too overly critical of Tatum, because that's not his forte. I don't expect.
And Tatum played more like Sam linebacker stuff off the ball instead of just playing on the edge too. But yeah,
it felt like, hey, and that's not playing into your personal advantages. And I know you're going to bring out bigger personnel in a game like this against an offense that's also playing a lot of heavy. But yeah, it didn't surprise me. Like, if Tatum's going to be in coverage, I think he's going to be attacked quite a bit. And that's not necessarily he's one of, if not Oregon's best defensive players. But of all the things he does, there's no question that's the weakest part. And that to me isn't that big of a deal, because I don't expect him to be in coverage very much. But when he was in coverage, it didn't play out great. Last couple here, opening the game in horrible weather with 3 straight pass plays. We touched on that. I agree. And then this is just, again, what we're talking about, playing 3 down linemen and 1 linebacker in Tuioti against 5 O-line with the quarterback in the empty. And the clear QB draw situation at the goal line to take the lead at the end of the game. Yeah, that one was, again, a little bit perplexing. But all in all, Ducks get the win, 8-1, 5-1 in Big Ten play, control their own destiny from a college football playoff perspective. Mm-hmm. If they lose this game, wouldn't be the case. Did it with so many key players not available. Did it in a really tough environment. I was not at Penn State, but of the games I've been to on the road in Big Ten play, I think this is the toughest environment they played in. I think Penn State probably fans who've been to a lot of these road games would love to hear from you and kind of give me some insights in what your perspective was. But that was a loud stadium. Again, the weather's not perfect, and they figured it out and really were in control for most of this game. And I guess my last thing here that I'll bring up, and again, if you've got more, John, to turn to, we can do that. But the last thing that kind of stood out, this drew some major parallels to me to the 2021 Ohio State game with Oregon, where you go on the road. In that game, it was Kayvon Thibodeau and Justin Flo, two of your best defensive players, one who was, I think, pretty clearly your best defensive player in Thibodeau, are ruled out, or there's discussions about them not playing kind of in the lead up, and the fan base kind of goes like, oh no, like they're not going to be able to figure this one out. And yet they do get the win, and it kind of sets the tone. I know that season didn't play out perfectly, but in this case, it sets the tone for the final 3 games of the season. 3 games the Ducks will be favored in, and 3 games I think are very, very winnable. And you take care of business here, I don't think you'll be in the Big Ten championship game. I think that's okay for a team that needs to get a little bit healthy. And maybe this is, if you're able to go 3-0, and maybe I'm just kind of maybe this is me being 2 glass half full. But if you go 3-0 and then you get a little bit of an extended break because you don't have to play in the conference championship game, maybe that gets enough time for a Decorian to get healthy, for Kenyon to be fully go, and to get Alex Harkey and Devin Jackson.
Evan Stewart even.
And Evan Stewart, dare we say. So,
yeah, I
don't know. This team needs to get healthy. It's a bummer that coming out of the bye, they suffered their worst week of like injury turnover, I guess. But hard not to leave this game feeling pretty positive about a lot of things. And I know looking at the message board, there was a lot of excitement just of like, hey, so many things felt like they were kind of stacked up against this team, and yet they were still able to figure it out.
Yeah, that's the point I was making earlier, just how when this game, we were getting to the start of this game, it just felt like everything was going against Oregon, and to be able to come out with a win like this, I think is just very impressive and should be acknowledged. I think like you said, get healthy and take care of business down the stretch should be the 2 things that Oregon needs to focus on. These are teams that are good, will threaten you with some of their weapons with USC and Washington, but are not defensively the team you played this week. So just, don't push it too hard over this last month where you're going to have more injuries, because you need everybody you can when it is December and January. But just, close things out down the stretch and take care of business, take care of those teams that you should, and Oregon's going to be in the spot that they should be in December, which is likely hosting a game here at Autzen.
Would be really fun to have a college football playoff game at Autzen Stadium. Obviously, no guarantees there. If you win out from here, I think you pretty much guarantee that. I don't think you're going to be a team that gets a bye week regardless, unless there's absolute chaos, which could happen. The next time you'll see the Ducks on the field will be next Friday, a short week, 6 p.m. kickoff on Fox against Minnesota. Gophers will be coming off a bye week. So kind of a lot of instances this year, by the way, John, where the team seems to have an extra week of prep than Oregon. I don't know. I know Dan's been a little bit
he counted them at one point for us.
Yeah, he counted those out for us one time, and I don't really blame him. The more you kind of get into this, it feels like every week you're saying the other team's coming off a bye week, and sometimes Oregon is, and sometimes they're not. But that's definitely going to be interesting to see how all of that plays out. Podcast will continue to roll on next week. I believe Matt Preem will be making his return at some point. We'll have some Gopher content with one of their writers middle of the week, the 2 of us at least, and maybe with Matt. We'll do a preview show, and then we'll be recapping that game Friday night at Autzen Stadium. So for John Evans, this has been Erik Skopil breaking down Oregon's 18-16 victory over the Iowa Hawkeyes from Kinnick Stadium. Talk to you later, folks.